A homeless girl begged the young billionaire, "Mister, could you buy me some bread? I'm really hungry." He helped her, but by following her steps, he made an unbelievable discovery that brought him to tears. The shrill sound of the alarm clock cut through the silence of the luxurious penthouse apartment, announcing the start of another day in the life of Jack Morrison. At 35 years old, Jack was the epitome of success in the world's eyes. A billionaire, CEO of one of the largest technology companies in the country, and one of the most eligible bachelors in high society. However, as he opened his eyes that Wednesday morning, Jack felt the same emptiness that had accompanied him for years. While getting ready for another day at the office, Jack looked at his reflection in the mirror. Perfectly styled brown hair, an impeccable Italian suit, and green eyes that, despite their intensity, carried a hint of loneliness that no amount of money could dispel. He sighed, adjusted his silk tie, and headed out to face the day. The Morrison Tech headquarters was a monument to power and innovation. Glass walls, cutting-edge technology, and a panoramic view of the city stretched as far as the eye could see. Jack crossed the lobby, greeting employees with a distant nod, his mind already focused on the challenges awaiting him. The morning passed in a frenetic succession of meetings, phone calls, and crucial decisions. Jack navigated this sea of responsibilities with the skill of a seasoned captain, but each corporate victory left a bitter taste in his mouth. Sometimes, he wondered if all that success was worth the loneliness he felt. When the clock struck 2 p.m., fast Jack decided to do something unusual. Instead of having lunch in his office as usual, he felt a sudden need for fresh air. "I'm going out for a walk," he informed his assistant, ignoring the surprised look she gave him. The streets of the financial district pulsed with the typical lunchtime frenzy. Rushed executives, wide-eyed tourists, and street vendors mixed in an urban symphony. Jack, with his expensive suit and imposing posture, stood out in the crowd like a shark among ordinary fish. As he walked, Jack felt the weight of expectations and responsibilities slowly fade away. For a few moments, he was just another anonymous person in the crowd, free from the burden of being Jack Morrison, the billionaire. It was in this distracted state that fate decided to intervene. "Mister, could you buy me some bread? I'm really hungry." The voice was so soft and unexpected that Jack almost didn't hear it. He stopped, looking around in confusion until his eyes landed on the source of the request. There, partially hidden at the entrance of an alleyway, was a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 4, but her eyes carried a maturity that made Jack's heart clench. The girl looked at him with a mix of hope and fear. Her dark hair was tangled and dirty, and the dress she wore seemed to have seen better days. But what stood out the most to Jack were her eyes, large, expressive, and a shade of brown that seemed to contain all the sadness in the world. For a moment, Jack was paralyzed. In his 35 years, no one had ever asked him for something as simple as a piece of bread. The reality of the situation hit him like a punch to the stomach. This child wasn't asking out of whim or greed. She was hungry. "What's your name?" Jack asked, his voice softer than he imagined it could be. "Lily," the girl replied, her small fingers nervously playing with the hem of her dress. Jack looked around, noticing a bakery across the street. "Wait here, Lily. I'll be right back." He crossed the street with determined steps, entered the bakery, and without a second thought, bought a bag full of fresh bread and some pastries. When he returned, Lily's relief was palpable. "Here you go, Lily," Jack said, handing her the bag. "There's plenty for you," and... But before he could finish the sentence, Lily grabbed the bag with surprising strength for someone so small. "Thank you, mister," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with a mix of gratitude and urgency. Then, as quickly as she had appeared, she darted into the alley, leaving Jack astonished. For a few seconds, Jack stood there processing what had just happened. The gratitude in Lily's eyes, the urgency in her actions, all of it sparked something inside him. Without thinking too much, he did something he never imagined he would do. He decided to follow the girl. Entering the alley, Jack found himself in a world completely different from the one he knew. The once majestic, well-kept buildings gave way to deteriorated structures covered in graffiti. The smell of garbage and sewage replaced the aroma of expensive coffee and designer perfumes. Jack followed Lily from a distance, trying not to draw attention. With every step he took, the contrast between his privileged world and this harsh reality became more evident. People slept in cardboard boxes. Others rummaged through trash cans in search of anything usable. It was as if he had crossed an invisible border into a foreign country, a place where survival was a daily, relentless battle. Lily navigated this maze of poverty with the familiarity of someone who knew every alley and nook. Finally, she stopped in front of a pile of boxes and pieces of tarp that, Jack realized with a pang in his chest, must be the girl's home. "Grandma! Grandma! Look what I got!" Lily's excited voice echoed through the alley. From the shadows emerged a figure that made Jack's heart tighten. An elderly woman, bent by the weight of years and hardship, appeared. Her face was a map of deep wrinkles, each line telling a story of struggle and perseverance. Her eyes, though tired, lit up at the sight of Lily. "Oh, my little one, where did you get all this?" The woman's voice was husky, but filled with love. Lily, displaying the typical enthusiasm of a child, began to talk about the nice man who had given her the bread. As she spoke, she opened the bag and, with a generosity that brought tears to Jack's eyes, offered the first piece of bread to her grandmother. The scene unfolding before Jack was heart-wrenching. Grandmother and granddaughter, sitting on the cold ground of the alley, sharing a simple piece of bread as if it were the most precious feast. Their gratitude and the way they savored each bite made Jack realize how much he had taken for granted in his life. The environment around them was desolate. An old, stained mattress served as a bed, precariously protected by pieces of tarp and cardboard. A few buckets caught rainwater, and a small pile of belongings, so tiny it could fit in a single suitcase, was all they had in the world. Jack watched, hidden in the shadows, how Lily and her grandmother interacted. Despite the dire circumstances, there was palpable love between them. The grandmother stroked Lily's hair as they ate, and Lily responded with smiles and spontaneous hugs. The reality of the situation hit Jack with full force. Here were two lives, two souls struggling to survive in a world that seemed to have forgotten them. And he, with all his billions, with all his power and influence, lived in a bubble of privilege, oblivious to this suffering happening just a few blocks from his luxury office. Tears began to roll down Jack's face before he could stop them. It was a mix of emotions, shame for his own ignorance, anger at the world's injustice, and a profound sadness for Lily and her grandmother. As he watched the loving interaction between grandmother and granddaughter, Jack felt something stir within him. A determination, a purpose that had long been dormant under layers of corporate ambition and the pursuit of material success. There, hidden in the shadows of a filthy alley, witnessing an act of love and generosity in the midst of extreme poverty, Jack Morrison, the billionaire, the business titan, the man who had everything, finally understood what had been missing in his life. With a heavy heart and a mind filled with conflicting thoughts, Jack quietly withdrew from the alley. But something had fundamentally changed inside him. He knew he couldn't just go back to his old life, pretending he hadn't seen what he saw or felt what he felt. As he walked back to the world he knew, Jack made a silent promise to himself, to Lily, and to her grandmother. He would use his resources, his influence, and every fiber of his being to make a difference. He wasn't exactly sure how, but he was certain his life would never be the same. The encounter with Lily wasn't just a casual act of charity. It was the catalyst for a deep transformation, the beginning of a journey Jack never thought he would take, one of redemption, discovery, and above all, humanity. As the city lights began to glow, marking the end of another day, Jack knew that for him, it was the start of something new. Something that would change not only his life, but potentially the lives of many others. With one last look at the alley where Lily and her grandmother struggled to survive, Jack went on his way, determined to be the change that the world, and he himself, so desperately needed. The next morning, Jack woke up with a sense of urgency he hadn't felt in years. Images of Lily and her grandmother had haunted him throughout the night, and he had hardly slept. Determined to act, he cancelled all his meetings for the day, a first in his career, and prepared to return to the alley. This time, Jack chose simpler clothes, jeans, a t-shirt, and a discreet jacket. He didn't want to draw attention or intimidate Lily and her grandmother. Before leaving, he packed a large bag with various foods: fresh fruit, bread, cheese, water, and even some chocolates for Lily. The path to the alley seemed different now. Jack noticed details that had previously gone unnoticed: people sleeping on sidewalks, collectors digging through trash cans, and the gradual deterioration of buildings as he moved away from the financial district. Each observation increased his determination. When he arrived at the alley, Jack's heart raced. What if they were no longer there? What if they had moved away, afraid someone might have found them? His fears vanished when he heard Lily's gentle voice from the back of the alley. "Grandma, look, it's the bread man." Jack walked in cautiously, holding the bag of supplies. As he approached, he saw Lily running toward him, a radiant smile lighting up her grimy little face. But right behind her came her grandmother, her face a mask of distrust and apprehension. "Lily, come back here right now." The woman's voice was firm, but Jack could sense the tremor of fear behind her words. Lily stopped, looking uncertainly from Jack to her grandmother. The smile on her face wavered, replaced by an expression of doubt that no child so young should have to wear. Sensing the tension, Jack stopped where he was and raised his hands in a sign of peace. "I mean no harm," he said, his voice soft and calm. "I just wanted to bring more food." Lily's grandmother narrowed her eyes, years of street experience making her wary of strangers, especially those who offered help for no obvious reason. "What do you want in return?" she asked, pulling Lily closer to her. The question took Jack by surprise. "Nothing," he answered honestly. "I just want to help." At that moment, Lily, displaying the innocence and bravery only a child can have, decided to intervene. She gently slipped from her grandmother's grip and took a few steps toward Jack. "Grandma, he's nice. He gave me bread yesterday, remember?" Lily's trust in Jack seemed to ease the tension a bit. The grandmother relaxed slightly, though her eyes still carried a shadow of distrust. Seizing the opportunity, Jack introduced himself formally. "My name is Jack. I saw Lily yesterday and couldn't help but notice you were going through hard times. I just want to help if you'll allow me." Lily's grandmother hesitated for a moment before replying. "I'm Emily," she finally said. "And you already know my granddaughter, Lily." Jack offered the bag of groceries, and after a moment of hesitation, Emily accepted it. Lily immediately began rummaging through its contents, her eyes shining at the sight of fresh fruit and chocolates. "Why are you doing this?" Emily asked, her voice a mix of gratitude and suspicion. Jack thought for a moment before answering, "Because I can, and because no one should have to live like this, especially not a child." While Emily examined the contents of the bag, Jack took the opportunity to get a better look at their living conditions. The makeshift shelter they had built was even more precarious than he'd initially thought. Pieces of cardboard served as a mattress, placed on wooden pallets to avoid direct contact with the cold, damp ground. A torn tarp, precariously tied between the alley walls, offered minimal protection from the rain. A few buckets were strategically placed to collect rainwater, and Jack noticed a small pile of neatly folded clothes in a corner, protected by a plastic sheet. The sight made him swallow hard, the reality of their situation hitting him with full force. Have you been living here for a long time?" Jack asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with untold stories. "Too long," she answered simply. Lily, unaware of the tension between the adults, happily munched on an apple from the bag. "Uncle Jack," she said, her innocent voice brimming with curiosity, "will you come back tomorrow?" The question caught both Jack and Emily off guard. Jack looked to the grandmother, searching for some sign of approval before replying. Emily sighed, seeming to weigh her options. Finally, she spoke. "If you really want to help, I won't stop you. But don't make any promises to Lily you don't intend to keep. She's had enough disappointments in life." Emily's words hit Jack like a punch to the gut. He knelt to Lily's eye level and said, with all the sincerity he could muster, "Yes, Lily, I'll come back tomorrow and the day after that. And as many days as you'll let me." Lily's smile lit up the entire alley, and even Emily seemed to relax a bit more. Before leaving, Jack made one last offer. "If you need anything at all, please tell me. I really want to help." Emily nodded slightly, still cautious, but visibly more open to accepting help. "Thank you, Jack. Maybe we can talk more tomorrow." With that promise, Jack left the alley, his heart lighter, but his mind filled with thoughts of how he could make a real difference in Lily and Emily's lives. In the days that followed, Jack kept his promise. Every single day, without fail, he visited the alley, always bringing supplies and, increasingly, hope. At first, his visits were brief and somewhat tense. Emily, though grateful for the help, maintained an emotional barrier. Decades of hardship had made her wary of strangers' kindness, but Lily, with her childlike innocence, quickly became attached to Jack. She awaited him eagerly each day, always with a radiant smile and countless stories to share. As the days went by, the tension began to ease. Seeing Jack's consistency and the genuine affection he showed Lily, Emily started to lower her defenses. Slowly, she began to share fragments of her story. One particularly cold afternoon, while Lily played with an old doll Jack had brought, Emily started to speak. "It wasn't always like this, you know," she said, her eyes lost in distant memories. "We had a life, a home. It wasn't much, but it was ours." Jack listened intently as Emily unfolded the sad story of how she and Lily ended up on the streets. A series of misfortunes: the death of Sarah, Emily's daughter and Lily's mother, during childbirth; job loss, untreated health problems, led to eviction and ultimately homelessness. "The hardest part," Emily continued, her voice breaking, "is watching Lily grow up like this. She deserves more: a roof over her head, food on the table every day, the chance to go to school. Sarah would have wanted that for her." Jack felt a lump in his throat. The injustice of the situation outraged him. How could it be that, in such an advanced society, people like Emily and Lily could slip through the cracks? As Emily opened up, Jack began to truly understand the daily challenges they faced. Hunger was a constant companion. Days with a complete meal were rare. The cold was relentless, especially at night, when the biting wind found its way through every gap in their makeshift shelter. But perhaps the most disturbing part was the constant insecurity. Emily spoke in hushed tones about the dangers of street life, threats of violence, the fear that social services might separate her and Lily, the daily struggle to maintain some semblance of dignity in a world determined to deny it to them. Lily, in her childlike innocence, sometimes shared her own experiences, which, though told with youthful simplicity, were nonetheless heartbreaking. "You know, Uncle Jack," she said one day, while drawing with some colored pencils he'd brought, "sometimes when it rains really hard, we pretend we're on a pirate ship adventure. The water comes into our castle," she pointed to the makeshift shelter, "but Grandma says pirates aren't afraid of getting wet." Jack felt his heart break a little more. Lily's ability to find joy and adventure in such difficult circumstances was both inspiring and profoundly sad. With each visit, each shared story, Jack became more and more involved in Emily and Lily's lives. He learned about their survival strategies, how Emily rummaged through restaurant trash for edible leftovers, how she taught Lily always to be alert and never to trust strangers too easily, how they kept each other warm on the coldest nights. Jack also started to understand the challenges homeless individuals face in accessing basic services. Emily spoke about the difficulty of getting medical care without a permanent address, how nearly impossible it was to look for work without a place to shower or store clean clothes, and the constant fear that Lily might get sick without proper care. Every new piece of information, every shared story, made Jack reflect more deeply on his own privilege and the glaring inequality in his city. He, who had always lived in a bubble of comfort and abundance, was having his eyes opened to a reality he'd previously chosen to ignore. One night after leaving Emily and Lily, Jack walked for hours through the city, his mind racing. He passed by fancy restaurants where he had often dined, saw people emerging from luxury stores laden with shopping bags, and watched sports cars pass by homeless individuals as though they were invisible. It was on that walk that Jack began to formulate more concrete ideas about how he could help not just Emily and Lily, but others in a similar situation. He realized that while immediate support with food and supplies was vital, It was also necessary to think about more lasting, far-reaching solutions. Jack started researching organizations that worked with homeless populations, studying public housing and social assistance policies, thinking about how he could use his influence and resources to create meaningful change. More than that, he began questioning the very system that allowed such inequalities to exist. How was it possible that he, with his billions, lived just a few miles away from people who fought daily for basic survival? As days turned into weeks, Jack's relationship with Emily and Lily deepened. He was no longer just the bread man, but a constant, reliable presence in their lives. Lily awaited him eagerly each day, always ready to show off her newest drawings or talk about her adventures in the alley. Emily, for her part, though still maintaining a certain reserve, began to see Jack as more than just a benefactor. She started sharing not just her difficulties, but also her dreams and hopes, her wish to see Lily in school, her desire to work again, her longing for a place they could truly call home. For Jack, every visit, every conversation, every one of Lily's smiles and each word of gratitude from Emily served as a reminder of the purpose he had found. He knew he had a long road ahead, that changing Emily and Lily's lives and others like them would not be quick or easy. But he was determined to try. As he walked back to his luxurious apartment after another visit, Jack found himself thinking about how much his life had changed in such a short time. Just a few weeks ago, he was a lonely billionaire, focused only on expanding his fortune and corporate empire. Now, he felt part of something bigger, connected to a world he used to ignore. Jack knew he still had much to learn and a lot to do. But for the first time in years, he felt truly alive, with a real sense of purpose. And as the city lights shimmered around him, Jack made a silent promise to himself, to Emily and to Lily. He would do everything in his power to help create a world where no one had to call a dark alley their home. With renewed determination, Jack began planning his next steps. He knew the journey would be long and challenging, but he was ready to face it. After all, he had found something far more valuable than all his billions, a purpose. It was a cold fall afternoon when Jack arrived at the alley for his daily visit to Emily and Lily. The wind blew strong, carrying dry leaves and a chill that seemed to penetrate to the bone. As he approached their makeshift shelter, Jack sensed something different in the air. A strange silence, broken only by a harsh, persistent cough. Turning the corner, Jack saw Lily sitting alone at the entrance to the shelter, her big eyes filled with worry. When she saw him, the little girl ran toward him, clinging to his leg. "Uncle Jack," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Grandma isn't feeling well." Jack's heart tightened. He knelt beside Lily, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "What's happening, Lily?" "She keeps coughing," Lily replied, tears forming in her eyes. "And she's really hot." Jack nodded, trying to stay calm so he wouldn't scare the girl further. "Let's go see her, okay?" Together they entered the shelter. The cramped space felt even smaller with the oppressive presence of illness. Emily lay on her makeshift bed, wrapped in thin, sweat-soaked blankets. Her face was pale, except for the red flush on her cheeks, indicating a high fever. "Emily?" Jack called softly, stepping closer. Emily opened her eyes slowly, her gaze unfocused and confused. "Jack," she murmured, her voice hoarse and weak. "You shouldn't have come. You could catch." Before she could finish, a violent coughing fit overtook her, shaking her frail body. Jack noticed with alarm that she could barely sit up. Without hesitation, Jack placed his hand on Emily's forehead, feeling the blazing heat of her fever. "Emily, you're burning up. We need to get you to a hospital immediately." His words seemed to rouse Emily from her feverish stupor. "No," she protested weakly, trying to sit up. "I can't. Lily, I can't leave her alone." Jack glanced at Lily, who stood nearby, wide-eyed with fear. He knew he had to act quickly, but he also understood Emily's fear. "Emily, listen," Jack said, his voice firm but gentle. "You need urgent medical care. I promise I'll take care of Lily while you're at the hospital. She'll be safe with me." Emily hesitated, her gaze shifting between Jack and Lily. Another coughing fit racked her body, and when it subsided, she looked even weaker. "Grandma," Lily said, her voice small but determined. "Please go with Uncle Jack. I'll be okay, I promise." The little girl's courage finally persuaded Emily. With a defeated sigh, she gave a slight nod. "Okay," Jack said, trying to sound confident and reassuring. "Lily, could you gather some of Grandma's things while I help her up?" Lily nodded vigorously, grateful to have a task. While she ran to collect a few of Emily's belongings, Jack gently helped the elderly woman sit. "It's going to be all right," he murmured, more to himself than to Emily. Getting to Jack's car was slow and painful. Emily could barely stand and Jack practically carried her. Lily followed closely behind, clutching a small bag with her grandmother's few possessions. Once inside the car, Jack turned the heater on full, hoping to warm Emily, who was shivering uncontrollably. Lily sat beside her in the back seat, holding her grandmother's hand and whispering words of comfort that sounded surprisingly mature for someone her age. The drive to the hospital was tense and silent, broken only by Emily's coughing and Lily's comforting murmurs. Jack kept his eyes on the road, his heart heavy with concern. He couldn't stop thinking about how quickly the situation had deteriorated. When they arrived at the emergency room, Jack quickly parked and rushed to help Emily out. The stark contrast between the sterile, brightly lit hospital and the dark alley they'd come from was jarring. "I need help here," Jack shouted as soon as they entered, immediately drawing the attention of the medical staff. Within minutes, Emily was placed on a stretcher and taken in for evaluation, leaving Jack and Lily alone in the waiting room. Lily, exhausted and frightened, clung to Jack's shirt, her small hands gripping tightly. "Uncle Jack," she whispered, "Grandma's going to get better, right?" Jack swallowed hard, fighting the lump in his throat. "We'll do everything we can so she'll get better, Lily. The doctors here are very good." The next few hours were a blur of paperwork, questions, and anxious waiting. Jack used all his influence to ensure Emily received the best possible care, but even so, the wait for news felt endless. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a doctor approached them. His expression was serious, and Jack felt his heart clench. "Mr. Morrison?" the doctor asked, and Jack nodded. "I'm Dr. Patel. I'm taking care of Miss..." "Emily? How is she?" Jack asked, his voice betraying his anxiety. Dr. Patel sighed. "Her situation is serious. Ms. Emily has severe pneumonia, complicated by years of poor health and exposure to the elements. We're admitting her to the ICU for intensive treatment." Jack felt Lily squeeze his hand tighter. He knelt to her level. "Lily, sweetheart, why don't you go to that table over there and draw a nice picture for Grandma? I'm sure she'll love it when she wakes up." Lily hesitated for a moment, then nodded and walked away, giving Jack and the doctor some privacy. "What's the prognosis, doctor?" Jack asked in a low voice. "It's hard to say at this point," Dr. Patel replied. "The next 48 hours will be critical. We're starting her on powerful antibiotics and respiratory support. Her age and overall condition complicate things, but we're doing everything we can." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of the situation. "Do whatever it takes, doctor. Cost is not an issue." The doctor nodded in agreement. "We'll do our best. You'll be able to see her soon, but only for a few minutes. She needs rest." As the doctor walked away, Jack turned his attention to Lily, who was engrossed in drawing at a nearby table. He approached her and sat down. "What are you drawing, Lily?" The girl looked up, a small smile on her tired face. "It's Grandma, you and me. We're in a real house, with a yard full of flowers." Jack felt his heart tighten. "That's a beautiful picture, Lily. I'm sure your grandma will love it." The next few hours tested their patience and endurance. Jack split his time between caring for Lily, making sure she ate, rested, and stayed occupied, and dealing with hospital bureaucracy. He made numerous calls, moving heaven and earth to ensure Emily received the best possible treatment. When they were finally allowed to see Emily in the ICU, the sight was shocking. She was hooked up to various machines, an oxygen tube in her nose, and she looked terribly frail in the hospital bed. Lily, brave as ever, approached her grandmother and gently held her hand. "Hi, Grandma," she whispered. "I drew a picture for you. It's the three of us in a pretty house. You have to get better soon so we can live there, okay?" Jack had to turn away to hide the tears forming in his eyes. Lily's strength and hope were both moving and inspiring. The following days were an emotional roller coaster. Emily fluctuated between moments of improvement and frightening relapses. Jack practically moved into the hospital, alternating between Emily's room and the waiting area where Lily spent most of her time. During this period, the bond between Jack and Lily grew even stronger. He became not just her protector, but also her confidant and source of comfort. Together, they faced the uncertainty and fear, leaning on each other in the hardest moments. Lily surprised everyone with her resilience. She spent hours drawing, creating colorful, hopeful stories for her grandmother. Whenever allowed, she read these stories to Emily, her childlike voice echoing softly in the sterile ICU room. One night, after a particularly difficult day when Emily suffered a scary setback, Jack found Lily alone in the waiting room, staring out the window at the city lights outside. "What are you thinking about, Lily?" he asked gently, sitting down beside her. Lily remained silent for a moment before answering. "Uncle Jack, do you think there's a place in heaven for people like me and Grandma?" The question took Jack by surprise, and his heart broke a little more. "Oh, Lily," he said, pulling her into a hug. "There's a place in heaven for all good people, and you and your grandma are two of the best people I've ever met." Lily nodded against his chest. "But I don't want Grandma to go to heaven yet. I want her to stay here with me." Jack swallowed the lump in his throat. "I want that too, Lily, and we're going to do everything we can to make that happen." In that moment, Jack realized how deeply Lily and Emily had touched his life. They were no longer just people he was trying to help. They had become family. As the days turned into weeks, Emily slowly began to show signs of improvement. Her breathing eased, the fever subsided, and she started having longer periods of consciousness. One sunny afternoon, nearly 3 weeks after her hospitalization, Emily opened her eyes and gave a weak smile to Jack and Lily, who were by her bedside. "My angels," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the recently removed breathing tube. Lily let out a squeal of joy and gently climbed onto the bed to hug her grandmother. Jack felt a wave of relief and gratitude wash over him. "Welcome back, Emily," he said, smiling through tears he could no longer contain. Over the following days, Emily's recovery continued slowly but steadily. She was still weak and would need a long time to fully recover, but the worst was behind her. One afternoon, while Lily was at the hospital cafeteria with a friendly nurse, Jack had a serious conversation with Emily. "Emily," he began, "these last few weeks have made me realize a lot of things. How fragile life is, the importance of family." Emily watched him closely, her eyes now more alert and alive. "I want you and Lily to come live with me when you're discharged," Jack continued. "I have plenty of space, and you'll have the care and comfort you deserve." Emily was silent for a moment, tears filling her eyes. "Jack," she finally said, her voice still a bit raspy, "you've already done so much for us. We can't accept more." Jack gently interrupted her. "Emily, please, you too. You've changed my life. You gave me a purpose, a family. Let me give something back, not as charity, but as family." Emily studied Jack's face for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Thank you, Jack. Thank you for everything." In that moment, Jack felt a new chapter beginning in his life, one full of challenges, no doubt, but also filled with love, purpose, and the promise of a better future for them all. As he watched the sunset through the hospital window, Jack reflected on how drastically his life had changed in such a short time. From a lonely billionaire with no direction, he had become part of an unlikely but deeply united family. Emily's illness, though frightening and difficult, had strengthened the bonds between them in a way Jack never could have predicted. He now understood more than ever the true meaning of family. It wasn't about blood ties, but about love, care, and being there in difficult times. Jack looked at Emily, who now slept peacefully, and at Lily, who had dozed off in a nearby armchair, a half-finished drawing in her lap. He smiled, feeling a surge of affection and protectiveness for both of them. The future was still uncertain, and there would be many challenges ahead. Emily's recovery would be long, and adjusting to a new life together would require patience and adaptation from everyone. But Jack was ready to face whatever came his way. He had found his purpose, his family, and he wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. With a contented sigh, Jack settled into his chair, preparing for another night at the hospital. Tomorrow would be a new day, the first of many in his new life as part of this improvised yet deeply cherished family. And so, as night fell over the city, that hospital room became a sanctuary of hope and silent promises. Jack, seated between Emily and Lily, felt more complete than he ever had in his entire life. Emily's illness had been a catalyst, transforming what began as a simple act of charity into something far deeper and more meaningful. Jack now understood that true wealth lay not in his bank accounts or corporate empire, but in the bonds he had formed with these two resilient souls. Looking to the future, Jack knew there would be challenges. Transitioning to life together would not be easy. Emily would need ongoing care, Lily would need to adapt to a new environment, and he himself would have to learn to balance his new family life with his professional responsibilities. But for the first time in a very long while, those challenges didn't scare him. On the contrary, he saw them as opportunities to grow, to love, to make a difference in a way that truly mattered. As sleep finally overtook him, Jack made one last silent promise, to himself, to Emily, and to Lily, that he would do everything in his power to build a bright future for his new family, one filled with love, security, and opportunities. With that comforting thought, Jack closed his eyes, a slight smile on his lips. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new joys, and he could hardly wait to face each one, with Emily and Lily by his side. The gentle sounds of the machines and the peaceful breathing of Emily and Lily formed a peculiar yet oddly comforting symphony. It was the sound of a family bound against all odds, facing the future together. And so, in that hospital room, a new story began to take shape, one of redemption, second chances, and the transforming power of love and compassion. A story Jack knew would continue to unfold in the days, months, and years to come. With that thought, he finally surrendered to sleep, his heart full of gratitude and hope for the future that awaited them. The day of Emily's hospital discharge finally arrived, almost 6 weeks after her admission. The sun shone through the hospital windows, as if celebrating this new chapter in their lives. Emily, still fragile but visibly recovered, sat on the edge of the bed, dressed in the new clothes Jack had purchased for her. Lily, unable to contain her excitement, hopped around the room, helping the nurse gather the few belongings they had accumulated during their stay. Jack watched the scene with a mixture of relief and anxiety, aware that while one challenge had been overcome, many others lay ahead. "Emily," Jack began, sitting next to her on the bed. "I know we talked about this before, but I want to confirm. I really would like you and Lily to stay with me, at least until we find a permanent place for you." Emily looked at Jack, tears forming in her eyes. For a moment, he feared she would refuse again, but then she nodded slowly. "Jack, you've done so much for us already," she said, her voice still somewhat hoarse. "But you're right. I need to think about Lily now. I can't risk getting sick again." Jack smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "Great, actually, I've already started looking for an apartment for you. Something modest, but comfortable and safe." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "Jack, you didn't have to." "I know," he interrupted gently, "but I want to. You both deserve a fresh start." At that moment, Lily approached, her eyes shining with excitement. "Grandma, we're going to have a real house." Emily pulled her granddaughter into a tight hug. "Yes, my love, it looks like we are." In the weeks that followed, Jack devoted himself to finding the perfect apartment for Emily and Lily. He toured dozens of places, always keeping their specific needs in mind. Finally, after much searching, he found the ideal place, a 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood with a small park nearby and a school just a few blocks away. Moving day came quickly. Jack hired a professional moving team but insisted on personally supervising the entire process. Emily and Lily didn't have many possessions, just some clothes and Lily's drawings, but Jack had made sure the apartment was fully furnished and equipped before they arrived. When the car stopped in front of the building, Lily could hardly contain her excitement. She jumped out, her eyes wide as she took in every detail of their new home. "Grandma, look. It's so big," she exclaimed. pointing to the 5-story building. Emily got out of the car more slowly, still recovering from her illness. Her face was a mixture of emotions: gratitude, anxiety, hope. Jack guided them to the 3rd floor, where their new apartment was located. When he opened the door, there was a collective gasp from Emily and Lily. The apartment was modest but cozy. The living room was lit by large windows that looked out onto the nearby park. The kitchen, though small, was equipped with modern appliances. But it was when Jack showed Lily her very own bedroom that the true magnitude of the change became evident. Lily's room was decorated in soft shades of lilac and green, with a single bed, a small desk, and a bookshelf filled with children's books. In one corner stood a little art table, stocked with all the drawing supplies a child could want. Lily stood in the doorway, her eyes wide in awe. Is all this mine?" she whispered. "All yours, sweetheart," Jack confirmed, smiling. With a shout of joy, Lily ran to the bed, jumping on it and laughing. Emily stood at the door, silent tears running down her face. "Jack," she began, but words failed her. Jack placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You two deserve this, Emily. Every bit of it." The following days were a mix of adjustment and discovery. Emily, who had lived with so little for so long, was often overwhelmed by the modern appliances and comforts of the apartment. Jack patiently showed her how to use the electric stove, the washing machine, and even the small tablet he'd bought, so she could stay connected and learn new skills. Lily, on the other hand, seemed to bloom in her new environment. She explored every corner of the apartment with childlike enthusiasm, always finding something new to marvel at. Her bedroom quickly became her sanctuary, the walls soon covered with her vibrant drawings. Jack helped establish a daily routine for both of them. In the mornings, they would have breakfast together, something Emily still found surreal, having enough food for 3 full meals a day. Then, while Emily rested or did light exercises recommended by the doctor, Jack took Lily to the park or helped her with educational activities at home. In the afternoons, Emily started cooking again, something she hadn't done for years. The first time she prepared a full meal in the new kitchen was an emotional moment for everyone. The smell of homemade soup filled the apartment, bringing a sense of home they hadn't experienced in a long time. "You know," Emily said as they served the soup, "I used to dream about cooking like this for Lily every day. It feels like a miracle that it's possible now." Jack noticed the immediate changes in both their moods and behaviors. Emily, though still cautious and sometimes overwhelmed, seemed more relaxed and hopeful. Her eyes, once always alert for the next danger, now glowed with a peace Jack had never seen before. Lily, for her part, seemed to grow and flourish each day. Her drawings, once full of shadows and solitary figures, now burst with vibrant colors and cheerful scenes of her new life. She drew pictures of her new home, the park, and often included Jack in her artwork, always with a big smile on his face. One evening, about 2 weeks after they'd moved in, Jack, Emily, and Lily sat in the living room after dinner. Lily was drawing on the new coffee table, while the adults chatted about next steps. "I think it's time we consider Lily's education," Jack gently suggested. "There's a good public school a few blocks away. Maybe we could visit this week, if you agree, Emily?" Emily nodded slowly. "Yes, I think it's time. Lily deserves every opportunity we can give her." At that moment, Lily looked up from her drawing. "I'm going to school?" she asked, her eyes shining with excitement. "Yes, sweetheart," Emily answered with a smile. "You'll learn lots of new things and make friends." Lily jumped up and ran to hug both her grandmother and Jack. "Thank you, thank you, thank you," she repeated, her joy contagious. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, exhausted but happy, Jack and Emily remained in the living room, reflecting on everything that had happened. "Jack," Emily began softly, "I can never thank you enough for all you've done for us. You didn't just save our lives, you gave us a future." Jack felt a lump in his throat. "Emily, you two have given me far more than I could ever repay. You gave me a purpose, a family. Before I met you, I had everything money could buy, but my life was empty. Now," he paused, searching for the right words. "Now I know what really matters." Emily took Jack's hand, squeezing it gently. "We're a family now, aren't we?" Jack nodded, feeling a surge of emotion. "Yes, we're a family." As he got ready to leave that night, Jack stopped at Lily's bedroom door. The girl slept peacefully, a slight smile on her face. On the wall next to her bed, a new drawing had been pinned up. It showed Lilia, Emily, and Jack holding hands in front of a building that looked very much like their new apartment. Above them, in colorful, slightly crooked letters, were the words, "My family." Jack felt tears forming in his eyes. He knew the path ahead would still be full of challenges. Emily was still recovering. Lily would have to adjust to school and normal life. And he himself was still learning how to balance his new family life with his professional responsibilities. But looking at that drawing, at the peaceful smile on Lily's face, and remembering the gratitude in Emily's eyes, Jack knew every challenge would be worth it. They were a family now, bonded not by blood but by something much stronger: love, compassion, and the promise of a better future. With one last look at Lily, Jack softly closed the door and left the apartment, his heart filled with a peace and purpose he had never known before. Tomorrow would be a new day, full of new adventures and challenges, but also full of love and hope. And he could hardly wait to see what the future held for his new family. As Jack descended the apartment stairs, he reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him there. Only a few months ago, he was a lonely billionaire living a life of luxury but devoid of real meaning. Now, he found himself at the heart of an improvised yet deeply united family. The cool night air hit him as he stepped outside, and Jack paused for a moment to look up at the apartment window, where Emily and Lily now slept safely. A sense of warmth and purpose enveloped him, something all his money and success had never provided. Jack knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges: adapting Lily to school, helping Emily fully regain her health and confidence, navigating the dynamics of their unconventional family. But for the first time in his life, he looked forward to facing those challenges. As he walked to his car, Jack made a silent promise to the stars above. He promised he would do everything in his power to protect and nurture this new family, giving Emily and Lily all the opportunities they deserved. More than that, he promised to be present, to be the support and love they needed. With one last look at the building, Jack climbed into his car. Tomorrow would be a new day, the first of many in his new life. A life full of purpose, love, and the joy of watching Lily and Emily thrive. As he drove home, Jack smiled to himself. He had set out to help two strangers, but in the process, he found something he hadn't even realized he was looking for: a family. And with that comforting thought, he moved forward, eager for the dawn of a new day and all the possibilities it would bring. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of the new apartment, signaling the start of a promising day. Jack arrived early, eager to take Emily and Lily on their first real exploration of the neighborhood. When he entered, he found Lily already awake, her eyes shining with anticipation. "Uncle Jack, are we going out today?" she asked, barely containing her excitement. Jack smiled, nodding. "Yes, we're going to explore our new neighborhood. There are lots of great things to see." Emily emerged from her room, still moving carefully but with a smile on her face. "Good morning, Jack. Lily hasn't stopped talking about our little outing since she woke up." After a quick breakfast, the three of them headed out into the sunny street. Jack offered his arm to Emily, who still needed a bit of support, while Lily skipped ahead of them, taking in every detail with wide-eyed wonder. Their first stop was the local park, just 2 blocks away. Upon arriving, Lily stood still, speechless as she took in the colorful, safe playground. Can I play there?" she asked hesitantly, as though she couldn't believe such a place existed for her. "Of course you can, sweetheart," Emily replied, her voice thick with emotion. Jack gently encouraged Lily. "Go ahead, Lily. It's all there for you to explore." With a shout of joy, Lily ran to the swings. Jack and Emily sat on a nearby bench, their hearts full as they watched Lily experience, for the first time, the simple delight of playing in a safe playground. While Lily played, an elderly lady approached the bench. "Good morning," she greeted warmly. "Are you new in the neighborhood?" "I don't recall seeing you around." Emily, initially tense at the approach of a stranger, relaxed upon seeing the woman's kind smile. "Yes, we moved here recently," she replied. "I'm Emily, and that's my granddaughter, Lily." "Wonderful to have new neighbors," the elderly woman exclaimed. "I'm Martha. I live in that blue building over there. If you need anything at all, just knock on my door." Jack watched with satisfaction as Emily and Martha chatted. It was the first time in years Emily had interacted so naturally with a neighbor. After a while, Jack noticed more children arriving at the park. He approached Lily, who observed them with a mix of curiosity and shyness. "Do you want to meet some new friends?" he asked gently. Lily nodded, holding Jack's hand tightly as he led her over to a group of kids playing in the sandbox. "Hello," Jack greeted the parents. "This is Lily. She's new to the neighborhood and would love to make some friends." The children looked at Lily with friendly curiosity. One girl around Lily's age smiled and offered her a toy shovel. "Do you want to help us build a castle?" Lily's face lit up, and she glanced at Jack, who nodded encouragingly. Soon, Lily was laughing and playing with her new friends as though she'd known them for years. After the park, the trio headed to the local library. The moment they stepped inside, Lily's eyes grew wide as she took in the shelves filled with colorful books. "I've never seen so many books in my life," she whispered, awestruck. Jack guided her to the children's section, helping her choose some books. Lily flipped through each one with reverence, as though holding priceless treasures. Can I take some home?" she asked timidly. "Of course you can, sweetheart," Emily replied. "We can come here whenever we want and borrow new books." While Lily explored the books with Jack, Emily noticed a poster announcing a community knitting group that met at the library twice a week. "You know," she commented to Jack when he approached, "I used to love knitting. I made clothes for Sarah when she was little." Jack smiled, understanding Emily's unspoken desire. "Why not join them? I'm sure they'd love to have you." Emily hesitated for a moment, then nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "Maybe I will. It would be nice to have something to do, to contribute somehow." When they left the library, Lily proudly carried her new library card and a stack of borrowed books. Her face glowed with happiness. On their way back to the apartment, they passed by the local community center. Jack noticed Emily's gaze linger on the building. "They offer a lot of programs here," he remarked casually. "Craft classes, reading groups, even basic computer lessons." Emily looked at him, a spark of interest in her eyes. Do you think I could learn those things?" "Of course," Jack replied enthusiastically. "You can learn anything you want, Emily. The sky's the limit." As they walked, the conversation naturally turned to Lily's future. "I think it's time we consider enrolling Lily in school," Jack gently suggested. Emily nodded, though Jack could see a trace of worry in her eyes. "Yes, you're right. She needs an education. But what if she struggles to fit in?" "We'll be here to help every step of the way," Jack assured her. "And remember, Lily is strong and smart. I'm sure she'll do great." When they finally returned to the apartment, Lily was exhausted, but happy. She couldn't stop talking about the park, her new friends, and the books she'd borrowed from the library. "This was the best day of my life," she exclaimed as Jack helped her put away her new literary treasures. Emily smiled, tears of happiness shining in her eyes. "And there will be many more days like this, my love. Many more." As night fell, and Lily finally drifted off to sleep, worn out yet joyful, Jack and Emily sat in the living room, reflecting on the day. "Thank you, Jack," Emily said softly, "for all of this, for giving us a chance to really live." Jack felt his heart swell with emotion. "There's no need to thank me, Emily. You two have given me far more than I could ever give back." As he prepared to leave, Jack looked once more at Lily's bedroom, where she slept peacefully, still clutching one of her new books. He smiled, knowing this was only the beginning of a new life full of possibilities for all of them. With a final goodbye to Emily, Jack stepped out into the night, his heart light and filled with hope for the future. Their day of exploration had been a success, opening up a world of possibilities for Lily and Emily. And he couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would bring for his new family. It was a cool fall evening when Jack decided to pay Emily and Lily a surprise visit. The sky was clear, dotted with stars, a stark contrast to the turmoil in his heart. Something compelled him to see how they were settling into their new life. Upon arriving at the apartment, Jack knocked softly on the door. There was no immediate response, but he could hear muffled sounds coming from within. Worried, he used the key Emily had given him for emergencies and quietly let himself in. The living room was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of a lamp. That was when Jack saw Emily, sitting alone on the couch, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. His heart clenched at the sight. "Emily," he called gently, not wanting to startle her. Emily looked up, surprised. Her eyes were red and swollen, tears leaving streaks on her wrinkled cheeks. "Oh, Jack," she said, hastily wiping her tears. "I wasn't expecting. Lily's already asleep." Jack moved closer, sitting next to her on the couch. "It's okay, Emily." "What happened?" For a moment, Emily remained silent, as though struggling internally with what to say. Finally, with a deep sigh, she began to speak. Today would have been Sarah's birthday," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "My daughter, Lily's mother." Jack felt a wave of compassion wash over him. He knew little about Lily's mother, only that she had passed away. Gently, he placed a hand over Emily's, offering silent support. Emily looked at their joined hands and continued. "Sarah was so young, so full of life. She was only 22 when—" Her voice faltered, but she composed herself. "When she left us," Jack listened attentively, sensing Emily needed to share this story, perhaps for the first time in a long while. "Sarah was always a determined girl," Emily went on, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "When she got a job as a housekeeper in that huge mansion on the outskirts of town, she was so happy. She thought we finally had a chance at a better life." Emily paused, lost in her memories. "At first, everything seemed perfect. Sarah loved her job, and the pay was good. But then—" She hesitated, as if the next words were too painful to say. "Then she fell in love with her boss." Jack felt a stab of concern, but remained silent, allowing Emily to continue her story. "He was a rich man, Jack, married, with a high society wife. Sarah knew it was wrong, but she said she couldn't control her feelings. They started an affair." Emily described in detail how the relationship between Sarah and her employer developed, how it began with furtive glances and shy smiles, evolving into secret encounters in the mansion's hidden corners. Sarah had confided everything to her mother, oscillating between guilt and the thrill of first love. "I tried to warn her," Emily said, pain evident in her voice, told her it could only end in tears, but Sarah was convinced he loved her, that he would leave his wife for her. Emily's voice trembled as she reached the hardest part of the story. "Then Sarah found out she was pregnant. She was so scared, Jack, so scared and so alone." Jack's heart clenched. He could imagine the fear and confusion Sarah must have felt. "When she told her boss about the pregnancy, he fired her that same day," Emily continued, anger now mingling with sadness. "Sent her away with a few $100 and threatened legal action if she dared tell anyone." Emily recounted the following months, how Sarah battled depression and fear, how they barely had money for food, let alone proper prenatal care. "I did what I could," Emily said, tears once again filling her eyes. "But we were so poor, Jack. Sarah needed medical care I couldn't provide." Jack listened, his heart heavy. He wanted to say something, to offer comfort, but he knew the best he could do now was be present and listen. Emily continued her story, describing the final months of Sarah's pregnancy, how she alternated between moments of hope and deep despair. "The day of the birth," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper, "was the scariest day of my life." She recounted, in painful detail, how Sarah went into premature labor, how they barely made it to the overcrowded, under-resourced public hospital. "There were complications," Emily said, her voice breaking. "Sarah, she lost so much blood. The doctors did what they could, but—" Jack felt tears burning in his own eyes as Emily described Sarah's final moments, how she had only a few minutes to hold Lily, to look into her newborn daughter's eyes, before closing her own for the last time. "I lost my daughter that day, Jack," Emily sobbed openly now, "but I gained a granddaughter, and I swore I'd do everything in my power to protect Lily, to give her the love Sarah couldn't." Jack pulled Emily into a hug, letting her cry on his shoulder. He felt emotionally drained just hearing the story. He couldn't begin to fathom the pain Emily had carried for so many years. After a few minutes, Emily pulled back, wiping her tears. "You know, Jack," she said, her voice a bit steadier, "sometimes I look at Lily and see so much of Sarah in her. The same smile, the same curious eyes." Jack nodded, thinking of Lily and all she'd endured in her short life. Then Emily said something that made Jack's world stop spinning. "The worst part, Jack, is that the man who did this, the father of Lily, he never found out what happened. Richard Morrison, the big businessman, probably doesn't even remember Sarah." Jack felt as though he'd been punched in the gut. Richard Morrison, his father. The name echoed in his mind, stirring memories of half-heard conversations and quickly silenced rumors. Flashbacks flooded his thoughts. He remembered a heated argument between his parents years ago, something about a housekeeper who'd been fired abruptly. At the time, he hadn't given it much thought. But now, Emily, unaware of the effect her words were having on Jack, continued to express her anger and grief toward the man who had abandoned her daughter. Jack barely heard her. His mind was in turmoil. Lily, the little girl he'd grown to love, was in fact his half-sister. His father, the man he'd always seen as a role model of success and integrity, hadn't just betrayed his mother, but had also abandoned a pregnant young woman. "Jack, are you okay?" Emily's concerned voice brought him back to reality. He realized he must be pale as a sheet, his expression revealing the shock he felt. Emily, misreading his reaction, placed a comforting hand on his arm. "Oh dear, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have unloaded all this on you. You've already done so much for us. You don't need to bear this burden too." Jack looked at Emily, seeing the genuine concern in her eyes. He wanted to tell her, to reveal the horrifying truth he'd just discovered. But the words stuck in his throat. How could he tell her he was the son of the man who had caused her family so much suffering? It's okay, Emily," he finally managed. It's such a sad story. I'm so sorry for everything you and Sarah went through." Emily gave him a sad smile, squeezing his hand. "Thank you for listening, Jack. You have no idea how good it feels to finally share this with someone." Jack nodded, feeling utterly lost. He knew he needed time to process this information, to decide what to do with this knowledge. But for now, all he could do was be there for Emily, offering the comfort she so desperately needed. As the night wore on, Jack stayed by Emily's side, hearing more stories about Sarah and Lily's early days. But his mind was miles away, struggling to reconcile the image of his father with the man in Emily's story. When he finally said goodbye, promising to return the next day, Jack stepped out into the cold night, the weight of the world on his shoulders. He knew nothing would ever be the same after that night. The truth he had discovered would change everything, not just for him, but for Emily, Lily, and his entire family. As he walked through the silent streets, Jack wondered how he would ever confront his father, how he would deal with this new reality. But one thing he knew for certain: no matter what happened, he would stand by Emily and Lily. They were his family now, more than ever, and he would do everything in his power to protect them and ensure they never suffered as they once had. With that resolve firmly in mind, Jack headed home, knowing that the dawn would bring challenges he never imagined he'd have to face. But he was ready, for Emily, for Lily, his half-sister, and for the memory of Sarah, the woman whose story had changed his life forever. Jack left Emily and Lily's apartment like a man in a trance. The weight of the revelations he had just heard bore down on him, each step toward his car requiring monumental effort. When he finally sat behind the wheel, his hands trembled so badly he could barely hold the keys. For several minutes, Jack remained there, unmoving, engine off and staring into the void. His mind replayed the conversation with Emily, each word echoing in his consciousness like a shout in the silence. Lily, the child he had grown to love, was his half-sister, and his father was the man who had abandoned Sarah to her fate. With a deep breath, Jack started the car. He knew where he had to go, even though every fiber of his being wanted to run from this truth. The Morrison mansion, once a symbol of success and aspiration, now loomed in his mind like a fortress guarding dark secrets. The drive to his father's estate was a blur. Familiar streets passed without notice, traffic lights barely registered. His mind was filled with memories, moments with his father that had once seemed precious, now stained by the revelation of such profound betrayal. When Jack finally reached the mansion gates, he hesitated. Part of him wanted to turn back and pretend he had never discovered the truth. But the image of Lily, innocent and carefree, pushed him forward. He needed answers. He needed to confront the man responsible for so much pain. The butler, taken aback by Jack's late visit, led him to Richard Morrison's study. Jack could hear the muted sound of television inside, a normal scene in stark contrast to the turmoil raging within him. "Jack," his father's voice sounded surprised as he entered. Richard Morrison, still imposing in his 60s, rose from his leather armchair. "What brings you here so late? Is everything all right?" Jack stared at the man he had idolized his entire life. Now he saw the lines of worry on his father's face, the signs of aging he had never before noticed. For a moment, his resolve wavered. "Dad," Jack began, his voice unsteady, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Richard frowned, confused. "Of course, son. What is it?" Jack took a deep breath, summoning courage. "Did you know a woman named Sarah about 5 years ago? She worked here as a housekeeper." The effect was immediate. Richard paled, his eyes widening in shock and, for a brief moment, fear. "Jack, what are you talking about? Why are you asking about former employees?" "Don't lie to me," Jack burst out, years of pent-up emotions flooding to the surface. "I know about Sarah. I know about the affair, about the pregnancy. I know you fired her when she needed you the most." Richard staggered as though he'd been punched, collapsing heavily into his chair. For long moments, he remained silent, avoiding his son's accusing glare. How did you find out?" he finally muttered. "Does it matter?" Jack retorted, his voice bitter. "What matters is that it's true. You betrayed Mom, got a housekeeper pregnant, and then abandoned her." Richard raised his hands in a gesture of supplication. "Jack, you don't understand. It was a mistake. I was going through a rough patch in my marriage, and Sarah was young and beautiful." "Don't you dare try to justify yourself," Jack yelled, his years of admiration replaced by searing anger. "She was just a girl. She trusted you and you used her, then discarded her like she was nothing." Richard sank deeper into his chair, the burden of guilt finally visible in his posture. I panicked," he admitted, his voice broken. "When Sarah told me she was pregnant, I saw everything I'd built collapsing. My marriage, my reputation, my company. I acted out of fear." Jack looked at his father, barely recognizing the man before him. The strong, confident figure he had always admired seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone frail and consumed by remorse. "Do you have any idea what happened to her?" Jack asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Sarah died, Dad. She died giving birth to a little girl, a girl who grew up on the streets because you were too worried about your precious reputation to face the consequences of your actions." Richard snapped his head up, shock evident in his eyes. "Dead? I didn't know." "Jack, you have to believe me. I never knew." "And that's supposed to make a difference," Jack shot back. "You abandoned her when she was pregnant and terrified. What did you think would happen?" A heavy silence settled over the study. Jack could hear the ticking of the antique clock in the corner, each second marking the chasm opening between him and his father. "The girl," Richard finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. What happened to her?" Jack felt a surge of protectiveness for Lily. "She survived," he said simply. "Her grandmother raised her, on the streets. Dad, your daughter, my sister, grew up without a roof over her head or food on the table." Richard covered his face with his hands, silent sobs shaking his shoulders. "I'm sorry," he murmured repeatedly. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Jack watched his father, a whirlwind of emotions engulfing him, anger, disappointment, pity. Part of him wanted to comfort the broken man before him. Another part wanted to scream for justice for Sarah, Lily, and Emily. "Being sorry isn't enough," Jack finally said, his voice firm. "You need to take responsibility, not just financially, but emotionally." Lily deserves to know who her father is. She deserves a chance at a better life. Richard raised his eyes, a glimmer of hope shining through his tears. Do you think she'd accept me? After everything? Jack shook his head, drained. I don't know, Dad. But you owe it to her, to Sarah, and to yourself to at least try to do the right thing for once. With those words, Jack turned to leave. He needed air, needed space to process everything that had just happened. Jack, his father's voice stopped him at the door. I really am sorry. For everything. Jack did not turn around. I know, Dad. But right now, your apologies don't matter. It's what you're going to do about it that does. With that, he walked out, leaving Richard Morrison alone with the weight of his past actions and the uncertainty of the future. Jack headed to his car, his mind still in turmoil, but with a renewed clarity of purpose. He knew the road ahead would be difficult. There was much to settle, many wounds to heal. But one thing was certain. He would do everything in his power to protect Lily and Emily, to give them the lives they deserved. And maybe, in the process, he could help his father find the redemption he so desperately seemed to seek. As he drove back to the city, Jack prepared himself for the challenges to come. The truth had been confronted, but the consequences of that truth were only beginning to unfold. As Jack drove back into the city, the quiet night stood in stark contrast to the whirlwind of thoughts in his mind. The city lights started to appear in the distance, each one a reminder of the world he knew, a world now irrevocably changed. He thought about Lily, sleeping peacefully in her new home, unaware of the storm raging around her. He thought about Emily, carrying the weight of a secret for so many years. And he thought about his father, a man he thought he knew so well, now revealed to be fallible and deeply flawed. Jack understood that the decisions he made in the coming days would shape not only his future, but the future of the newly discovered family he had. The responsibility weighed heavily, but along with it came renewed determination. When he finally arrived at his own apartment, Jack felt drained, both physically and emotionally. But as he prepared for bed, a resolution formed in his heart. No matter how difficult it might be, he would do the right thing. For Lily, for Emily, for Sarah, and even for his father. Dawn would bring new challenges, difficult conversations, and important decisions. But Jack was ready to face them. With a final sigh, he closed his eyes and let sleep take him, knowing that when he awoke, it would be the beginning of a new chapter in his life. One of truth, redemption, and above all, family. The next morning, Jack woke with the weight of the truth still pressing on his shoulders. He knew he could not postpone the inevitable. It was time to share what he had discovered with Emily and Lily. Heart heavy, but resolute, he made his way to their apartment. When Emily opened the door, Jack's expression must have shown something was wrong. "Jack, what happened?" she asked, concern clear in her voice. "Emily, we need to talk," Jack said gently. "It's about what you told me last night." Emily nodded slowly, a mixture of fear and curiosity in her eyes. She called Lily, who was playing in her room, and asked her to go play in the building's playground for a bit. Once they were alone, Jack took a deep breath and began, "Emily, what I'm about to tell you will be a shock, but I need you to hear me out." He then revealed the painful truth that Richard Morrison, Sarah's father-in-law and Lily's grandfather, was in fact his own father. Emily listened in silence, her eyes widening at the revelation. "So, you're—" she started, her voice trembling. "Lily's half-brother?" "Yes," Jack finished, his voice laden with emotion. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken implications. Emily put her hands over her face, trying to process. Jack waited patiently, giving her the time she needed. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice a whisper. "I always wondered why you cared so much about us, why a stranger would dedicate so much to helping two unknown people." Jack leaned forward, taking Emily's hands in his. "Emily, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know until last night. But I want you to understand. My feelings for you and Lily, my desire to help, they were genuine before I found out the truth, and they still are. Emily nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. I believe you, Jack. And in a way, it makes sense. The way you look at Lily, how you worry about her, it's how Sarah would have. A moment of mutual understanding passed between them. Despite the shock of the revelation, there was also a sense of relief, like pieces of a puzzle finally falling into place. What do we do now? Emily asked, breaking the silence. Jack sighed. I think we need to tell Lily. She deserves to know the truth, even if she can't fully understand it yet. Emily agreed. Yes, you're right. But how do we explain something so complicated to a 4-year-old? Together, they discussed the best way to approach the subject with Lily. They decided to be honest but gentle, using language the child could grasp. When Lily returned, bounding happily into the apartment after her playtime, Jack and Emily exchanged a look of understanding. It was time. Lily, sweetheart, Emily said softly, come here. Uncle Jack and I have something important to tell you. Lily approached, curious. Jack knelt to her level, his heart pounding. Lily, he began, choosing his words carefully, you remember how we sometimes talk about your mommy who's in heaven? Lily nodded solemnly. Yes, Grandma says she's a star now. Jack smiled gently. That's right. Well, last night, we found out something very special. We found out that your mommy's dad is also my dad. Lily scrunched her brow in confusion. But what does that mean? Emily chimed in gently. It means, Gavi sweetie, that Jack isn't just your Uncle Jack. He's your brother, your half-brother to be exact. Lily's eyes went wide. Brother, like in the stories. Jack nodded, tears forming in his eyes. Yes, Lily, like in the stories. It means we're really family. Lily was silent for a moment, absorbing this information. Then, to everyone's surprise, a huge smile lit up her face. Does that mean you'll stay with us forever? Jack felt his heart overflow with emotion. He took Lily's small hands in his. Yes, Lily, I promise I'll always be here for you. Always. Lily let out a squeal of joy and flung her arms around Jack, hugging him with all the strength her little body could muster. Jack hugged her back, tears streaming freely down his cheeks. Emily watched the scene, her own tears falling silently. She joined the embrace, wrapping her arms around Jack and Lily. For a long moment, they stayed like that, bound together in a hug that symbolized their new reality as a family. When they finally released each other, they all wore teary smiles. So, Lily said, looking between Jack and Emily, we're a real family now. Yes, my love, Emily replied, gently stroking Lily's hair. We're a real family. Jack looked at them both, feeling a mix of joy and determination. He knew the road ahead would still be filled with challenges. More truths would need to come out, more adjustments would be required. But in that moment, embraced by his sister and the woman who had become like a second mother to him, Jack knew they would face it all together. Her family, he repeated softly. Our family. And so, in that modest apartment filled with love and newfound truth, a new family was born, not bound solely by blood, but by choice, by love, and by a shared future. In the weeks that followed this revelation, Jack, Lily, and Emily began adjusting to their new reality as a family. What had once been the dynamic of a benefactor and two recipients evolved into something deeper and more meaningful. A typical day in this new family started early. Jack, who used to live alone in his luxurious apartment, now spent most of his time at Emily and Lily's modest home. He arrived in the mornings, often carrying fresh coffee and pastries for breakfast. Emily, always an early riser, would already be awake, making breakfast for Lily. The smell of scrambled eggs and toast filled the small apartment, creating a warm, home-like atmosphere. Good morning, family, Jack would say upon entering, a broad smile on his face. Lily, still in her pajamas, would run up to hug her newly discovered brother. Jack! You came, she'd exclaim, as if every visit were a wonderful surprise. Together, they'd eat breakfast, talking about their plans for the day. Jack divided his time between working remotely and helping Lily with her lessons. Because Lily wasn't yet enrolled in school due to the unique circumstances of her previous life, Jack took responsibility for ensuring she didn't fall behind academically. He converted the dining table into a makeshift classroom, stocked with children's books, colored pencils, and paper. "Okay, Lily," Jack would say, sitting beside her. "How about we learn a few more letters today?" Lily, eager to learn, leaned over the paper, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration as she tried to form the letters. Jack guided her patiently, praising each small accomplishment. "Look, Grandma," Lily would exclaim, holding up a paper with shaky but readable letters. "I wrote my name." Emily would smile, her eyes shining with pride. "It looks wonderful, darling. You're getting so smart." In the afternoons, while Lily took her nap, Emily often sat with Jack, sharing family stories. She talked about Sarah, Lily's mother, recounting anecdotes from her childhood and showing old photos she had managed to keep through her years of hardship. "Sarah had Lily's same smile," Emily would say, pointing to a faded photo. "And her same determination, too." Jack absorbed every word, every story, feeling connected to a part of his family he had never known. These conversations created a sense of heritage, a line that tied the past to the present and the future. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Jack worked tirelessly to secure Emily and Lily's financial future. He set up a trust fund for Lily, ensuring she would have resources for her education and beyond. For Emily, he arranged a generous monthly allowance, guaranteeing she would never again worry about money. "Jack, this is too much," Emily protested when he told her about his plans. Jack held her hands in his. "Emily, you're my family now. Please let me do this. It's the least I can do after everything you've been through." Over the months, the transformation in Lily was remarkable. The child who once lived on the streets now blossomed under constant love and support from her brother and grandmother. Her smile, always bright, seemed to light up the entire apartment. She made rapid progress in her lessons, eager to learn and grow. Lily's birthday was approaching, and Jack was determined to make it a memorable occasion. He planned a small party at the local park, inviting some of the neighborhood kids Lily had befriended. On the day of the party, the park was decorated with colorful balloons and a large banner that read, "Happy Birthday, Lily." There was a cake adorned with sugar flowers, children's games, and even a small magic show Jack had arranged. When Lily arrived, her eyes went wide with surprise and joy. "Is all this for me?" she asked, hardly believing it. "All for you, Princess," Jack replied, smiling. "Happy birthday." The party was a success. Lily ran around playing with the other kids, her laughter echoing through the park. Emily watched, tears in her eyes, moved by seeing her granddaughter so happy and carefree. Later, as the children ate cake, Jack found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed. Only a few months ago, he was a solitary billionaire, focused solely on amassing more wealth. Now, here he was, surrounded by children's laughter, part of a family that loved him for who he was, not for his money. "A penny for your thoughts," Emily said, stepping beside him. Jack smiled. "I was just thinking about how everything changed, how a simple act of buying bread for a hungry girl turned my life completely upside down." Emily nodded in understanding. "Fate works in mysterious ways, doesn't it? Who would have thought that day would lead us here?" After the party, when most of the guests had left, Jack, Emily, and Lily stayed behind at the park. Lily, still bursting with energy, raced across the grass, chasing soap bubbles Jack blew into the air. Emily joined in, and soon the three of them were laughing and playing together as though the rest of the world didn't exist. It was a moment of pure joy and familial love. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jack picked Lily up in his arms, spinning her around. Their laughter mixed, creating a melody of happiness. Emily watched them, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. She thought of Sarah, wishing her daughter could see Lily's joy, witness the family they had become. Eventually, exhausted and happy, they settled on a bench. Lily, now sleepy, nestled between Jack and Emily, an arm draped over each of them. "I love you guys," she murmured, her eyes closing. Jack and Emily exchanged glances over Lily's head, both feeling the gravity and beauty of that moment. "We love you too, sweetheart," Emily replied softly, stroking Lily's hair. Jack looked up at the darkening sky, thinking about the journey that had led them here. The power of love and compassion, the strength of family ties, no matter how unexpectedly they formed, was truly miraculous. As the first stars began to appear, Jack made a silent vow. He promised to protect and cherish this family with all his being, ensuring Lily and Emily would never again face the pain and deprivation they once had. The final image of that evening was one of peace and hope. Lily, dozing between her brother and grandmother, her face serene and content. It was the symbol of a bright future, of a family bound together by love and the adversities they had overcome. And so, under the starlit sky, a new chapter began for this unlikely yet profoundly united family. A chapter filled with promises, with love, and the certainty that whatever the future held, they would face it together,